The trucks in a half-circle facing the gorge, headlights off. The night came down like a weight. You don't think about ghosts when you're young and carrying a rifle, but that winter night in 1944, every truck in that convoy felt haunted. My name's Sergeant Elijah Carter, Red Ball Express, U.S. Army. I was 24, already felt older. Europe had a way of grinding years into your bones. We'd been pulled from a supply depot near the Belgian line, ordered to haul rations and ammo to a forward post that barely showed up on the maps. Command called it routine. The lieutenant in charge, a young white officer named Foster, said we'd be fine as long as we kept formation. He didn't look at me when he said it. He almost never did. There were 6 trucks in our column, 2 jeeps for escort, one up front, one trailing behind. Most of us were colored drivers, proud of what we did, even if the Army pretended not to see it. We moved everything the front needed, from bandages to shells, but our convoys never made the newsreels. Foster liked to remind us to stay sharp, as if we hadn't been dodging bombs and ice for months already. We rolled out just after dusk, the sky bruised with snow clouds, the headlights cutting narrow cones through the flurries. The engines growled against the cold. You could smell the diesel even over the pine air. Private Daniels rode with me, young, restless, always humming under his breath when nerves got him. Behind us, Harrison McBride shared a truck heavy with crates stamped medical. We were ghosts hauling medicine for men who'd never know our names. The first few miles were easy. Flat road, tall firs dusted with snow, moonlight sneaking through clouds in thin silver ribbons. We barely spoke. The wind made conversation useless, just the crunch of tires over frozen ruts and the occasional cough of an engine. Somewhere behind us, a man started singing softly. An old church hymn swallowed by the hum of motors. It steadied the heart. Around the 10th mile marker, the road began to climb, twisting up into the hills. That's when the fog came. It seeped from the valleys first, low and white, then rising thicker until the world beyond the hood was nothing but swirling milk. Foster slowed the pace, headlights bouncing off the mist, making it feel like we were driving inside a tunnel that never ended. I rode shotgun, watching the glow from the jeep ahead fade and reappear. Daniels gripped the wheel tighter. "Feels like the world's shrinking," he said. "Just keep steady," I told him. "Road's still there even when you can't see it." He laughed nervously. "Maybe for you, Sarge. The road listens to you." We passed the burned-out shell of a farmhouse on a bend. Its roof had caved under snow. A single black chimney stuck up like a gravestone. As we rolled by, I thought I saw someone standing in the doorway, just a blur of gray in the fog. But when I blinked, it was gone. I told myself it was a shadow. A few miles later, a truck backfired and half the convoy flinched, rifles half raised before anyone realized it wasn't gunfire. Foster's voice cracked through the radio, sharp and steady, on keep formation, no stopping. His tone was the same one he used when he spoke to me, clipped and cold, as if words cost him something. I caught Harris's eyes in the side mirror when our trucks aligned for a moment. He gave a small nod. Respect that men like us traded quietly. Out here, you didn't need speeches. Just someone who'd look you in the eye when others wouldn't. The fog thickened until it pressed against the windshield like wet wool. Snow turned to icy pellets, tapping the glass. The road narrowed to a single lane cut into the hillside. Rock wall to the left, a steep drop to a frozen river on the right. The convoy's taillights glowed red in the mist like dying embers leading us upward. That's when the radio crackled. A whisper at first, static and half-formed words we couldn't place. Daniels tapped the handset and swore softly. The signal had been clear at the base. Now it sounded like voices buried under water. Foster called a brief halt near a switchback to check the antenna. We stood in the headlights' glow, snow swirling like ash in a spotlight. My breath fogged the air, and for the first time that night I felt something colder than the wind slide down my spine. Not fear of the enemy. I'd known that plenty. This was different. The kind of dread you can't name, the kind that makes you feel watched when there's no one there. We climbed back in. Engines rumbled alive again. The radio stayed full of whispers, and the road ahead vanished entirely into the fog. I didn't know it then, but that was the last mile any of those trucks would see. The climb grew steeper as we pressed on. The tires groaned over frozen ruts, engines straining in second gear. You could feel the vibration through the floorboards like the trucks themselves were nervous. The fog thickened until each headlight beam looked like a spear of pale light stuck into cotton. We could barely see the bumper ahead of us. Foster's Jeep slowed to a crawl at every bend. No one spoke over the radio anymore. Just the constant wash of static, soft and steady, like someone breathing too close to the mic. The men were jumpy, shoulders hunched, eyes wide. I kept my focus on the faint red glow of the taillights in front of us, following them like a lifeline. We passed the ruins of what must have been a roadside shrine. A stone arch leaned under the snow, a wooden cross nailed crooked to the rock. Someone had tied a strip of cloth to it, white and fluttering even though there was no wind. Daniels whispered, "Maybe the saints are watching." I didn't answer. I wasn't sure they were. After another mile, the road narrowed until our right side tires were inches from open air. The drop disappeared into fog so thick it felt solid. The smell of diesel and cold steel filled the cab. Daniel shifted in his seat, his jaw tight. "Sir," he said quietly, "you think they even know we're up here?" I didn't lie. "No, son, they don't." The radio hissed again, a crackle followed by a whisper that slid through the noise. It sounded like someone saying a name, but it wasn't one I knew. Foster came through a second later, his voice clipped. "Maintain spacing. No chatter." The kind of order meant more for control than safety. He still didn't trust me to speak unless spoken to. The fog pressed harder. The world beyond our headlights ceased to exist. My watch ticked slower, each minute stretching thin. Then it happened. I blinked once and the taillights ahead were gone. Just darkness. Daniels cursed, slammed the brakes. The truck behind us nearly hit our bumper. "Lieutenant, we lost visual on 4, I called into the mic. Static answered, then his voice calm but edged. "Hold position. Verify count." I leaned out into the cold, squinting through the haze. 5 trucks. There had been 6. I counted again. 5. I checked the road. No skid marks, no broken rail, nothing. It was as if one truck had been erased from the world. Foster arrived in a few minutes, boots crunching on snow. His flashlight beam cut through the fog in narrow bands. He asked how sure I was. I said, "Sure enough to bet my life." He looked at me, jaw tight. It was the first time that night he didn't look past me. We doubled back half a mile, flashlights sweeping the edge of the cliff. Nothing. No debris, no flame, no sound from below. The snow was smooth except for our own tracks. "Road's clean," Harris called. "Truck's gone." No one spoke after that. We all just stood there, surrounded by the hiss of falling snow. I could see in their faces that they wanted to blame someone. Anyone. One of the privates muttered that maybe the driver panicked, maybe took a wrong turn, but there were no turns. Foster finally said, "We move on." Maybe he doubled back. It was nonsense, and everyone knew it. Still, the order was the order. We climbed back into our cabs. Engines coughed awake one by one. Daniels kept glancing at me as if I could promise him the road wouldn't take another. I didn't have that kind of faith left. "Just keep your eyes forward," I told him. "Don't look back unless I say so." We rolled slow, maybe 10 miles an hour. Fog pressing so thick it felt like the trucks were pushing through smoke. I watched the mirror. 5 points of red behind us, glowing dim through the mist. 5. Always 5. Half an hour later, the static on the radio began again. Only this time it wasn't random. Between the bursts of noise, I heard something like a heartbeat. Then faint words, drawn out, wet, almost human. "Stop. Bridge. Gone." I froze. Daniels looked at me. "What did it say?" I shook my head. "Nothing we need to hear." He turned back to the road, hands trembling on the wheel. I could see the reflection of his eyes, wide and afraid. Outside, the fog seemed to pulse with light like it was alive. We drove another mile in silence. Then Foster's voice broke through again, low and steady. "Convoy, stay sharp. Don't lose focus. We finish this run, we all go home." He said it for them, but maybe, just maybe, he said it for me too. The road wound higher into the mountains, curling like a pale scar between black trees. The fog never lifted. It just shifted, pooling in hollows, crawling low over the snowbanks like it was alive. We drove in silence, the only sound the grind of chains on ice and the hiss of the wind pushing through the pines. Every so often I checked the mirror, counting taillights again. 5. always 5 now. But I never stopped expecting one of them to wink out. About an hour after the first truck vanished, Daniel started humming under his breath. It was some half-remembered gospel tune from Alabama, low and shaky. He said it kept his nerves steady. I told him to keep it up. Even that broken tune was better than silence. Foster's Jeep stayed out front, the red glow of its brake lights the only thing that told us we still had a leader. We rounded a blind curve and the road ended in a wall of snow and splintered branches. A landslide had come down from the slope above, half burying the trail. Foster called a halt. We climbed out, shovels in hand, boots sinking in the drift. The air was so cold it felt sharp in the lungs. Nobody talked much. Just the scrape of metal on ice and the hiss of our breath. After 10 minutes, Harris straightened, flashlight sweeping the trees. "Thought I saw something move," he said. We all looked. Nothing but drifts and dark trunks. Still, for a heartbeat, I thought I saw it too. Something tall and pale slipping between the trees, gone the moment I blinked. Foster barked, "Keep working," though his voice lacked its usual edge. He was rattled, even if he'd never admit it. When we finally cleared a path wide enough for the trucks, he ordered us forward again. I took the second position, keeping close to the Jeep. The fog pressed thicker. The snow had turned fine and steady, floating like ash. The road wound around the hill in narrow bends, the cliff edge so near that every turn made my stomach tighten. Somewhere below us, a river whispered beneath the ice. I couldn't tell if the sound was comforting or cruel. It was near midnight when the radio came alive again. At first, just static. Then a voice, distant, hollow, drawn out like an echo from a well. "Fox lead. Do you copy?" Not one of ours. The accent was wrong, stretched and foreign. Daniels reached for the mic. "Who is this?" "Say again, over." The reply was half static, half breath. "Turn back. Bridge. Gone." Then silence. Only the low hum of interference, steady as a heartbeat. We tried to raise command. No answer. The signal was gone, eaten by the mountain. Foster's Jeep stopped at a narrow bend and his door opened. He stood in the road, radio pressed to his ear, face lit ghost white by the dial. "Command's out," he said. "We keep moving." Nobody argued, though I saw the doubt in every man's eyes. Daniels leaned closer and whispered, "If this road's cursed, maybe it's punishing the wrong people." I said, "The mountain doesn't care who's driving." We rolled on, slower than before. The headlights felt weaker, swallowed by fog that never stopped moving. The world beyond the hood didn't exist. It was like the trucks were crawling through a dream that refused to end. Around 2 in the morning, the snow stopped falling, but the silence got heavier. It pressed against your ears until even the engine seemed distant. I watched the gauges, oil, pressure, heat, all steady, yet I could feel the truck straining like a living thing afraid to go on. Then a shadow crossed the beams ahead. There and gone again. Daniels jerked the wheel. "What was that?" he gasped. "Keep straight," I snapped, "and don't look at it." My voice came out harder than I meant, but he obeyed. When we finally reached a small clearing where the road leveled, Foster called another stop. We stepped out to stretch, boots crunching on frozen gravel. The fog around us pulsed faintly like it breathed. I caught Foster watching me. His expression had changed. The usual tight line of his mouth was gone. He said quietly, "You've kept them steady, Sergeant. That counts." It was the first time he'd said my rank without hesitation. I nodded once. "We just keep moving, sir." He glanced at the dark slope ahead. "That's what I'm afraid of," he said. The engines rumbled back to life. The men climbed in, shoulders stiff, eyes hollow. As we pulled out of the clearing, I looked back once more. The snow we'd cleared was already smoothing over, hiding every sign we'd ever been there. The mountain was erasing us 1 mile at a time. The bridge was nothing but splintered timbers and torn steel cables hanging over a gorge black as tar. Snow drifted down through the gaps, vanishing into the river that churned somewhere far below. We stopped 50 yards short, engines idling, breath fogging the air inside the cabs. Foster climbed down from his Jeep and walked to the edge. His flashlight beam swept across the gap, finding only ruin. The map said the bridge was solid, reinforced just a week earlier. But standing there, it was clear no one had crossed in months. The supports looked eaten by time. Rotted wood, rusted bolts, the kind of decay no enemy shell could take credit for. Daniels leaned out the window beside me. "Looks like the mountain don't want company." I told him to hush, though I agreed. Harris killed his engine and came forward, rubbing his hands. That's it then. We can't go forward. Foster turned to him, his voice clipped. Set a perimeter, no fires, we wait till daylight. He didn't look at me when he said it, just like before. But this time the men did. They waited for me to nod before they moved. We parked the trucks in a half circle facing the gorge, headlights off. The night came down like a weight. The fog settled low, thick as wool. The cold was so deep it felt like something alive crawling beneath the skin. I sat in the cab with the radio on low, nothing but static filling the silence. Every few minutes I thought I heard voices hiding under it. Slow, broken murmurs that stopped when I leaned closer. Daniels came by the truck window. You hear that, Sarge? He asked. Wheels. Down there. I cut the engine, listening. Faint but clear under the hiss of the wind there was a slow grinding sound. Like rubber over gravel, heavy and distant. It rose from the gorge, then faded. I said quietly, There's no road down there. Daniels crossed himself and walked back without another word. Hours passed. Snow thickened, smothering every sound except our breath. I walked the line of parked trucks, checking each man. They were quiet, eyes darting toward the trees, some whispered prayers. Harris sat on an ammo crate, staring at the void beyond the bridge. When I reached him, he said, Feels like we ain't supposed to be here. I answered, Then we'll leave as soon as daylight lets us. Around 2 a.m, I saw a light. Faint, far off, across the ruined bridge. Not a lantern. Not that steady. It flickered once, twice, and then slid behind the trees. I raised the binoculars but saw only fog and shadow. Foster came to stand beside me. Think you saw something? He asked. Yes, sir. Something moving. He frowned, eyes on the darkness. Maybe the locals were right about this road being cursed. I said nothing. Some curses don't need words to work. We went back to our trucks, each man wrapping himself tighter in his blanket. I tried to rest but couldn't. Every creak of metal sounded like footsteps. Every gust of wind through the canvas made me think someone was whispering just beyond the door. The radio hissed again, a low hum that rose and fell like breathing. I turned it off and sat in silence, waiting for dawn that refused to come. When gray light finally bled through the fog, it didn't feel like morning. The snow had stopped, but the cold was worse. We gathered by the lead jeep. Frost covered every windshield. The men looked hollow-eyed. Foster unfolded his map, voice flat. We'll try the northern pass. It might loop back to the main road. Daniels muttered, If it lets us. Foster glared but didn't reply. For once, he looked uncertain. I took the map from him, tracing the lines with my finger. There's a ridge trail here, I said. Narrow, but it'll hold the weight if we take it slow. He hesitated before nodding. All right, Sergeant. You lead the column. The words hit harder than I expected. First time he'd ever given me the front. I climbed into my truck, breath clouding the air, and keyed the radio. Convoy, roll out. One by one, engines came alive, low and tired. As we pulled away from the gorge, I looked back once. The bridge hung like a broken skeleton against the gray light. For a moment, I thought I saw something standing on the far side, a shape thin and still, watching us leave. Then the fog swallowed it whole. We turned north, tires crunching over the untouched snow. The convoy moved slow, engines murmuring like prayers. No one spoke. Somewhere behind us, the mountain sighed. The sound might have been wind, but I didn't believe that anymore. And though none of us said it out loud, every man there knew the truth. The bridge hadn't fallen. It had been taken. Dawn never really came. The sky just turned from black to bruised gray, and the snow looked yellow and tired under it. We packed up the perimeter in silence, no one saying much. The trucks sat half buried, their engines groaning awake like old men asked to rise before their bones were ready. The air bit at every inch of exposed skin. Foster called us to the lead jeep. His face looked carved from stone, frost in his eyebrows. We'll skirt north, he said. There's a ridge road that runs parallel to the pass. Should meet the main supply route again by dusk. Keep it tight. No gaps. He looked at me for half a second longer than usual, then turned away. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was close enough. We rolled out single file. The snow was deeper than before, heavy enough to swallow the tracks behind us almost as soon as we made them. The pines on both sides leaned under the weight, their branches scraping the canvas tops like fingers dragging across skin. The men inside the truck spoke in low murmurs. voices carried thin by the radio. Daniels kept humming. It sounded like a heartbeat we all needed. The fog thinned for a while, and for the first time in hours, the world seemed wider. We passed a stretch of open ground, a frozen meadow where the wind carved the snow into ripples. It should have been a relief, but none of us relaxed. The sky above was pale and still. It felt like being watched. Around mid-morning, Daniels called over the radio. "Sarge, we're down to 4. I checked the mirror. He was right. A truck that had been behind Harris was gone. No noise, no skid marks, no flash of light. 1 minute there had been 5. Now there were 4. Foster stopped the column and climbed out, his breath clouding in short bursts. "Count again," he ordered. We did. 4 trucks. Nothing else. We backtracked half a mile, engines idling low, men walking beside the wheels to study the ground. The snow was smooth, too smooth. It was as if the missing vehicle had never rolled there at all. Foster stared into the white void for a long time, then asked quietly, "Anyone see it fall back?" No one answered. Harris finally said, "Road eats things, sir." It wasn't a joke, but a statement. Nobody laughed. Foster exhaled hard, his breath like smoke. "We move, slow. Eyes on your mirrors." He turned to me. "You keep them steady, Sergeant. You lose another, I'll answer for it." "Yes, sir." I didn't tell him that whatever was taking us didn't seem to care who gave the orders. We climbed back in and rolled forward again. The road tightened to a ledge carved into the mountainside. The cliff rose high to the left, sheer and gray. To the right, the drop plunged into mist that hid everything below. Snow kept falling, soft as ash. I could feel the weight of it pressing on the truck, muffling every sound except the low growl of the engine. Hours dragged by. No one spoke. Each man sat alone with his thoughts. I could feel fear thick in the air, heavier than the fog. By afternoon, we reached a bend where the mountain curved like a scythe. The sun was just a pale smear behind the clouds. The radio hissed again, soft, rhythmic. At first, I thought it was just the hum of interference. Then a voice, faint and distant, slid through. "Too late." Daniels looked at me. "That was a voice, wasn't it?" I didn't answer. The next mile was nothing but white silence. The trucks crawled along, the gap between them shrinking until the bumpers nearly kissed. Each man watched the mirror, terrified of seeing it empty. When the slope leveled, we found a clearing barely wide enough to circle what was left of the convoy. Foster stepped out, looked at each of us and said, "Engines off, check the cargo." The men moved slow, stamping their feet to keep warm. Harris opened his canvas and froze. "Sir," he called, "half my crates are gone." We checked them all. Every truck had lost something, rations, fuel, ammo. No broken locks, no torn covers, just gone. Foster's jaw clenched. "We must have been hit in the night." "By who?" Daniels asked. "The snow?" Foster didn't reply. His eyes flicked toward me, then away again. Maybe he thought I had answers. Maybe he just wanted someone to blame. We resecured what was left and climbed back into the cabs. The engines turned slow but caught. The cold made every sound brittle. We moved again, heading for the ridge where the map promised the main route would reappear. The snow eased for a moment, and I saw daylight break through the clouds. The light touched the road ahead and stopped, as if the mountain itself refused to let it pass. Behind me, 4 trucks rumbled in rhythm. I watched them through the mirror, my breath fogging the glass. 4 red lights, 4 men I still had, and the sinking feeling that by nightfall I'd count fewer than that. By late afternoon, we reached a fork in the trail. One path climbed toward a mountain pass marked on Foster's map. The other dipped into a ravine where a frozen stream glimmered faintly beneath the snow. The lieutenant stood over the hood of his jeep, map pinned down by his gloved hand. The wind pressed against our backs, steady and cold. "The pass looks drifted," he said. "We'll take the stream bed. Might be rough, but it's straighter." Nobody argued. We were too tired to care. I could see the strain in the men's faces, lips cracked, eyes dull, hands trembling when they reached for their canteens. We hadn't eaten in nearly a day. The cold made you forget hunger until it came back all at once, like a punch in the gut. We rolled into the ravine, engines growling low, tires crunching through the crusted ice. The walls rose steep on both sides, shutting out the sky. The trucks kicked up mist that turned to frost on the windshields. I watched the gauges. Everything held steady. For now. An hour down the ravine, the light began to fade. The fog had followed us, curling down the slopes like a living thing. Daniels muttered, "Can't shake it, Sarge," like it wants to come with us. I didn't reply. The truth was, I felt it too. The way the air pressed closer, heavy and listening. That was when I saw it. A shape up ahead on the bank, half buried in snow. I hit the brakes and the truck slid a few feet before stopping. Foster's voice came over the radio, sharp. "Why are we halting?" I grabbed the mic. "Got something up ahead." We crept closer. It was a truck. One of ours. The missing fourth. It sat tilted in a drift, nose buried, door open, no footprints around it, no sign of a crash. The snow inside the cab was smooth, untouched. Foster climbed out first, pistol drawn. I followed, rifle slung across my chest. Daniels stayed behind the wheel, eyes darting between us and the fog. The silence in that ravine was suffocating. Even the engines idled quieter, like they were afraid to make noise. The missing truck's headlights were dark, the battery long dead. I pulled open the driver's door. The seat was empty. The key still hung in the ignition. Half a pack of cigarettes lay crushed on the dash. Whoever had been here hadn't walked away. There were no tracks to prove it. "Johnson's rig," Harris said behind me. He was right behind me this morning. His voice cracked at the end. Foster circled the truck, shining his light along the undercarriage. No damage. Engines clean. Tires. Good. No reason this thing should have stopped. He looked at me then. "You think they deserted?" "Men don't desert with a truck full of supplies and nowhere to go," I said. We hooked a tow chain to the bumper and hauled it back in line. Leaving a loaded vehicle behind felt worse than superstition. It felt wrong, but driving that rig again sat heavy in everyone's stomachs. Harris volunteered to take the wheel, saying he didn't scare easy. He didn't say it loud enough for anyone to believe him. We moved on, slower now. The ravine twisted like a knife cut through the hills. The fog thickened again, swallowing the rear trucks until I could only see faint red glows behind me. Then the radio hissed, louder this time, sharp and full of static. "Fox lead, do you copy?" The voice was low, stretched thin by distance, then a second whisper, clearer than before. "Elijah." I froze. The name came again, long and drawn out. "Elijah." Daniels heard it too. His eyes flicked toward me, wide. "Sarge, that... Don't say it," I cut in. My throat felt tight. "Keep driving." We stayed on the move, though no one breathed easy. The whispers came and went, buried under the static. Sometimes I thought I heard other words in there. Pleas, prayers, orders, but they never made sense. By nightfall, we found a patch of level ground beneath a crooked pine and stopped to rest. The men moved slow, checking each truck like the motion alone could keep them from vanishing. The air smelled of metal and frost. We set up a small fire, shielded from the wind by a truck hood. The flames barely touched the cold. Foster sat opposite me, rubbing his hands. For the first time, he looked less like an officer and more like a man who'd run out of answers. "What do you think's happening to them?" he asked quietly. "I think the mountain doesn't like company," I said. He gave a small nod, eyes fixed on the fire. "I used to think bravery meant shouting orders loud enough that no one heard your fear. What do you think now? That bravery's keeping your hands steady when you don't believe the ground's real anymore?" The fire cracked. Snow whispered down from the branches. Somewhere in the distance, something creaked. A long, slow groan, like wood under strain. Harris stood and peered into the dark. Sounded like... Before he could finish, the noise stopped. The night went still. We doused the fire and took turns on watch. I stayed awake long after my shift, staring at the fog moving through the ravine like it was breathing. By the time dawn's gray light began to seep through, I counted the trucks again. 3. One had vanished. No sound, no light, no tracks, just gone. I woke before dawn. Not because of the cold, but because the silence felt wrong. It was the kind of silence that hums in your bones like the air itself is holding its breath. I sat up in my bedroll and counted the trucks by their shapes in the half-light. 1, 2, only 2. The third truck, the one we'd recovered the day before, was gone. There were no tracks, no broken branches, no sign of where it had gone. Just empty snow and a chain lying slack in the frost, the same chain that had hitched it to the truck behind mine. Foster swore under his breath, the sound sharp in the still air. "We'll search the ravine," he said. His voice had lost the command it once carried. Daniels looked ready to argue but stopped when he saw my face. There was no point. We all knew what we'd find. Nothing. We walked the stream bed for nearly an hour. The sun crept weakly over the ridge, a pale coin behind the clouds. The snow gleamed silver where it lay untouched. No tire marks, no footprints. The mountain had swallowed another piece of us. When we came back, Foster stood by the lead truck, map folded in one hand. "We move," he said flatly. "We can't stay here." I wanted to ask what difference it made, moving or standing still. But the men needed a direction, even if it was the wrong one. "Yes, sir," I said. "Let's roll." The climb toward the pass was worse than any road I'd seen. The trail narrowed to the width of a truck, a wall of ice on one side and a drop straight into cloud on the other. We crawled along in low gear, tires slipping, engines whining. Every few minutes the road groaned beneath us like it might give way. The wind picked up by midday, carrying with it a smell I'll never forget. Not smoke, not fuel, something older. Earth and rot, like a grave turned up by a plow. Daniels covered his mouth with his scarf. "Sarge," he said softly. "That smell." "I smell it too," I said. "Keep your eyes forward." The fog thickened again, curling low across the road. We drove through it like ghosts passing through ghosts. The static on the radio rose and fell, never quiet for long. Every so often I thought I heard words hiding under it, but the more I listened, the less I wanted to understand. Then at noon, the signal cut sharp and clear. One word came through, a whisper that filled every cab in the convoy. "Stop!" Foster hit the brakes so hard the lead truck skidded sideways, tires spitting snow. We jumped out, rifles ready. The wind tore at our coats, filling the gaps with icy knives. I scanned the ridge above us, nothing but snow and stone. Daniel shouted, "It came from the radio!" Foster's face had gone white. He gripped the receiver, knuckles pale. "Who is this?" he barked. "Identify yourself." Static answered, followed by a sound that might have been a breath, then silence. We waited, straining to hear something, anything, but there was only the wind. Foster lowered the handset, his jaw tight. "Back in the trucks," he said. His voice was barely more than a whisper. We rolled on, slower than ever. The wind howled through the pass, dragging the fog in long ribbons that snaked across the trail. My hands ached from gripping the wheel. I could feel the men's fear in the way the engines stuttered, every shift in gear sharper than it needed to be. That night we camped just short of the crest. The air was so cold it made our breath hang like smoke. We built a small fire, the flames flickering weakly against the dark. Daniel sat close, staring at the road we'd come up by. He hadn't said a word since the stop message. "Get some rest," I told him. He shook his head. "It's following us." I wanted to tell him he was wrong, but I couldn't. I felt it too. The weight of something unseen pressing closer every hour. Foster sat on a crate near the fire, radio in his lap. He hadn't touched it since noon. When I sat beside him, he looked up, his eyes hollow. "Sergeant," he said quietly, "if something happens to me, you get them off this mountain." "Nothing's happening to you, sir." He managed a thin smile. "That's an order anyway." The fire crackled, spitting embers into the cold air. I stared at the flames until my vision blurred. The shadows around the camp seemed to shift, bending in ways light shouldn't allow. Sometime after midnight, I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, crunching in the snow just beyond the firelight. I grabbed my rifle and stood. The sound stopped. I stepped past the circle of light. Nothing but the shapes of trees and the endless white. Behind me, the others stirred, whispering. I told myself it was the wind, but I didn't believe it. When morning came, the light gray and weak, I counted again. 2 trucks, 4 men, and 1 mountain left to cross. We reached the top of the pass by mid-morning. The world below us was buried under fog, a sea of gray stretching as far as the eye could see. It should have felt like victory getting that far with 2 trucks still running, but none of us felt it. The silence up there was heavy, the kind that presses behind your ribs until you can't tell if it's fear or grief. Foster stopped the lead truck and climbed out. His boots crunched on the ice as he pointed down the road ahead. The trail wound like a pale thread through the valley, disappearing into the mist. "That's our way out," he said, though his voice didn't carry the certainty it once did. "Stay close." We started the descent slow. The road curved sharply, the drop on one side vanishing into clouds. The tires slipped now and then, and every skid made my stomach twist. The radio was dead quiet except for the faint hum that had followed us for days. It was almost comforting by then, like the heartbeat of something that refused to die. Halfway down the slope, Foster's hand shot up. He stopped the Jeep and pointed ahead. In the snow just before the first switchback, a set of fresh tire tracks cut across the trail, too fresh to belong to anything but one of ours. Harris leaned out the window. "Those can't be from yesterday, they're clean." We followed them slowly, engines idling. The tracks led us along the narrow road until the trees opened into a small hollow. There, half buried under the pines, sat the missing truck. It was turned sideways across the path, engine cold, door hanging open. The snow around it was smooth except for faint claw marks etched along the steel door. Not scratches. Deep grooves like something with nails instead of fingers had tried to get in. Foster walked to the back and pulled the tarp. The cargo bed was empty. Every crate we'd hauled up that mountain was gone. Not stolen, taken. Daniels crossed himself. Harris whispered a prayer under his breath. I just stared at the empty bed, my breath fogging in front of me. Foster knelt beside the door and touched one of the gouges. "What could have done this?" he asked quietly. I said, "Whatever it was, it followed us here." He looked at me then, not the way he used to, not as a man trying to measure another, but as someone who knew he was already standing at the edge of something he couldn't fight. "We can't tow it," he said finally. "We leave it." We pushed the truck aside enough to squeeze through and kept rolling. The fog thickened again, swirling in slow circles that drifted across the road. The wind came from below now, carrying the faint sound of water rushing under ice. We drove for another hour without a word. The radio hissed softly, the same breath-like static that had haunted us since the first truck vanished. Then faintly through the noise, a voice emerged. "Turn back." Daniels grabbed the mic. "Who is this? Say again." Too late. Then silence. The sound died like a candle flame snuffed out. The truck behind me sputtered and went quiet. Harris leaned out the window. "Fuel lines frozen," he called. Foster looked back, then at the valley below. "We're almost there. We walk if we have to." We left the truck where it died, packs slung over our shoulders. The air stung our faces, the cold biting deep enough to make the bones ache. We followed the road on foot, boots crunching through snow that had turned blue in the fading light. By dusk, we reached the valley floor. The forward camp was there, just like the map said. Rows of tents, fires long dead, no movement. The flags hung limp. The silence was absolute. Foster approached the nearest tent and lifted the flap. Cots stood empty. Steam still curled faintly from a pot near the coals, as if the men had left only minutes before. "They're gone," he said softly. I looked toward the far end of camp. The fog had begun to creep between the tents again, slow and patient. Daniel's voice cracked. "Sir, maybe we shouldn't stay here." Foster nodded once. "We'll take turns on watch. If they're out on patrol, they'll be back." We built a small fire in the center of the camp, more out of habit than hope. The flames cast long shadows that danced across the canvas walls. Hours passed. The fire burned low. The fog thickened. One by one, the others dozed off, their breath soft in the cold. I sat alone, rifle across my knees, staring into the dark. Somewhere beyond the camp, a whisper rose, a voice I'd come to know too well. "Elijah." I stood slowly. The sound came from the valley road. I took a few steps toward it, eyes straining through the fog. And there it was, the missing truck, headlights dim, engine idling, parked just beyond the tents. I blinked, and it was gone. Only tire tracks remained, leading back into the mist. By morning, the fog had lifted. The others were gone. No footprints, no signs of struggle, just the fire burned down to ash in the empty camp around me. I walked out alone, following the road until it met the main route days later. A patrol found me near the rail line, half frozen, still clutching the radio handset. They asked where my unit was. I told them the truth. "They're gone." They wrote it down as missing in action. They never wrote what I saw. The fog that breathed, the whispers that called my name, the mountain that ate men whole. Decades later, I still dream of that road. I see the headlights fading one by one, the red glow swallowed by white. And sometimes, just before I wake, I hear the radio crackle again, a voice whispering through the static. "Stop." I wonder sometimes if we should have listened. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. These memories aren't easy to share, but they deserve to be heard. If you want more stories like this, of soldiers, of the strange and the tragic that linger after the shooting stops, subscribe and leave your thoughts below. Your voice keeps these stories alive, and these ghosts deserve to be remembered.